Hey y'all, don't come for me. I know it has been a while. It has been a while, right? So if you're new here, my name is Serena. This is my channel. Hey, how are you? Right now, I'm actually in Houston. It's been a really busy week. I got home late last night. I had to hurry up and pack my suitcase. Got up supremely early this morning, rushed into the airport to get here for this conference. It's going to be going on for about 3 to 4 days. Well, at least the meat of, what you will want out of a conference is going to happen in about 3 days. So there's supposed to be a bunch of panel discussions, a lot of talks around like AI and all the things that are changing, ever changing. And there's also a career component at the end of the week, I believe. So there's going to be a bunch of companies there. They're going to be interviewing on the spot, all the things. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see. I've never been to the MBA conference before, so I'm new to this whole process. I was sitting next to a young woman whose company is here, and I forgot her title, but she said there's about 40 people from her company that are actually going to be at the conference. So I can imagine that if that's only for one company, there's probably going to be a lot of people scaling those floors over the next 2 to 3 days that I'm here. So I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to meet some new people. And then also just learn about like the different types of companies out there, the new technology, and different things that, I can potentially tap into if I'm looking to do a career change in how many ever months. I think it's just kind of good to keep your ear to the street and network and have, different people in your corner so that, if an opportunity comes up, they know to think of you. So, back to what I was saying earlier about me traveling to Houston. So I've never been to Houston before. So this is going to be a new experience for me. I don't know if I'm really going to be exploring, especially with all the stuff that been all of the stories that have been coming out about, the people that they've been finding. Don't know too much about that, but I just want to be extremely safe while I'm here. So I probably won't be doing too much. I'll be in and around the conference center. And yeah, so by the time you guys see this video, I would have already left. All right. I know I haven't posted any other content in a while. I know on the last video, I asked you guys to leave me some comments down below just to let me know if there were some things that you all wanted me to cover. So I put together some stuff. Right now, I have to go to the conference. I'm probably going to be there for most of today. So if I have some time when I come back, I might end up recording that for you guys. But if not, I will just capture some footage while I'm at the conference if I can. And then I'll most likely record again tomorrow morning just so I can just get something out and be organized and, put together. So yeah, so I'm going to head out and I'll see you guys later. Hey guys, what's up? So I'm finally back in the hotel. I'm so tired, just been moving around all day. And when I came back, I actually went downstairs and I asked them if they could switch me to another room because there was no view in the other room that I was in. So I wanted to switch and move to an upper floor if it was available so that I could just rest and kind of sit by the window. And I knew I had to, film this video today, so I wanted to make sure I had some good lighting, and it worked out perfectly. So I've just kind of been sitting here resting and thinking about what I wanted to discuss with you guys today. So I know in the last video we talked about, overcoming loss, and I kind of gave you guys some tips on what you could potentially do, what you should be focusing on when you are going through a season of significant loss. Now, the reason why I wanted to share that was because a few months ago, I was actually laid off from my job, along with, I think, 300,000 other African-American women who have also been laid off. Honestly, I'm going to keep my opinions to myself. I don't know if it has anything to do with DEI. I don't know if it has anything to do with, companies just downsizing or what have you. I know in my particular situation, I have been with my company for a significant amount of time, and I was not expecting it. There was no fair warning. There was no post on the calendar to say, hey, we have this scheduled meeting that we want to do with you. It was just kind of like, the next day I was at work, and then the next day I wasn't. So it was very shocking. It was very surprising. I went through a plethora of emotions. And so now that I'm kind of settled and I've accepted it for what it is, and I'm moving on with my life, as should you if you are currently going through this same sort of thing. I've just kind of been thinking about, what has helped me navigate this space over the last several weeks. I say I'm going on month 3 now. So I just kind of wanted to drop by and give you guys some tips. So if there's anybody out there, you lovely ladies and fellows, if you are going through a job loss, if you were laid off, first of all, I'm so sorry. I want you to know that this does not have anything to do with your worth and what you bring to the table. You don't have to feel any shame around this, because I know when it happened to me, I felt a significant amount of shame. And I'm like, yeah, no, it wasn't you. The business decided that they were going in a different direction. They were restructuring. Potentially, that's what I was told. I don't necessarily know if there was anyone else that was laid off. Frankly, that's none of my business. So, I won't worry about that part of it. So I don't want you to worry about that part of it. And I want you to keep in mind that if you have recently been laid off, it's not your fault. And this is a part of life. It's a growing pain. You will get through this just like you have gotten through every other thing in your life that has presented its challenges. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to navigating a layoff is to grieve it. When you get laid off from your job, it is going to feel like a death, like you have lost a loved one, especially if you've been there for a really long time. You are going to go through so many different emotions. I know I did. There was moments where I was kind of upset. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why it was happening. Then you want to think about how certain aspects of an environment may have been toxic and, what have you, which that wasn't my, case, because I was working remotely. So I wasn't like really engaging with my coworkers and such. And also, I'm not going to use this as a time to, bash anybody or a brand or anything like that, because it's really not about that. It's about moving forward in the best way, in the most positive way. So I do want you to grieve it. Depending on what type of person you are, you might have to take a step back from social media. You don't want to be on LinkedIn. You don't want to maybe even be sharing this with too many people, right? Because you know how people are. Like, some people are judgmental. Some people are not going to have great things to say. They're not going to be uplifting you. And on the negative side of it, it could be that, I don't know, we all got haters. And, I don't know if I have any haters. Maybe I do. But, sometimes you just have to kind of keep it to yourself, because you don't want to be telling people this, and you are in a very vulnerable space. So if you have a few trusted people that you want to tell that you are experiencing this, then go ahead and do that, especially because you know that at some point in time, you're going to have to get up again. You're going to have to get the strength from somewhere to start applying for jobs and interviewing and putting yourself back out there. Once you get hired again, you are going to have to go through all the training and everything to become this like new version of you, right? Like, you are creating a potentially new life for yourself, because you have lost that old thing. You have left the old thing. And so now you're getting ready to walk into something new. And I know that can be very, very scary, because you don't necessarily know what it's going to look like. And you don't know all of the intricacies of how long this process is going to take, especially in today's market, right? I know for me personally, when I talk about grieving the job layoffs, is looking at LinkedIn, right? I saw so many people who were posting saying, oh my God, I have been looking for a job for 6 months. I've been looking for a job for a year. I still can't find anything, right? And that could be debilitating for somebody who just found out they got laid off, right? Like, you could lose hope, especially if you were not one of those people who was in a position to save and make sure that you were, in a position to not have to work, for a while, or if you're not married, you know what I mean? If you don't have a significant other who's going to be picking up the slack of you being laid off and stuff like that. So there's a lot to think about, right? So for me personally, I just got off LinkedIn because I'm like, that doesn't necessarily have to be my narrative. That might be that person's narrative or somebody else's narrative, but it doesn't have to be mine, and it doesn't have to be yours either. Just because it took somebody else 10 months to find a job, please, you got God. You better pray. You better have some faith. You better start being very intentional about the applications that you're putting out there, up-leveling your skills. There's so many different things that you could be doing in that time that you're not working, so that you can make sure that you're in the best position, so that when it's time to move into that next season, that new job, whatever, even if it's entrepreneurship, you are ready for it. You are not focused on what other people are doing, because that's just going to add to whatever, pain or whatever discouragement you may be feeling, right? So that's number one. You have to grieve the job loss. You have to let it go, right? And you have to find a healthy way to do it. And sometimes those healthy ways are going to include you not telling everybody. They are also going to include you maybe taking a step back from social media and just focusing on yourself, sitting with yourself, and all the things, right? Now, after you've made it out of that stage, this is what I personally did. So, take this with a grain of salt, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. But you need to structure your reset. And what I mean by that is that you have to get very clear on what you want, meaning what type of jobs are you looking for? What titles are you looking for, right? Because at every company, the workload may be the same, but sometimes the job titles are different, right? So if you are going for, like a business development representative position or something like that, at another company, it might be called an associate development manager or something like that. But when you look at the job descriptors, it'll show that you'll have some of the same responsibilities. So you have to figure out, like, what do you want your job title to be? Once you figure out what your job title is, then you can go and you can do some research, and you can find other job titles that may be similar to that particular job title. Start looking at those job descriptions and then apply for those jobs based off of your transferable skills. So if you already have, 5 years or whatever working in a sector, maybe you have some certifications or whatever, then those are all transferable skills that you can utilize when it comes to structuring your reset, right? Networking is also another key piece to add. I know a lot of us, especially me, I'm kind of introverted, so I don't necessarily like to get out and have to be talking to a whole bunch of people if I don't have to. Like I said, even me being at a conference this week is kind of unnatural for me, because I like being to myself, right? Like, I can be around people and do all the things, right, when I need to, but it's not my preference. But when you have experienced a job layoff, you don't have a choice, right? Because applying for jobs is only going to get you so far, especially in 2025. So you have to make sure that you are not only applying for jobs online, but you have to make sure that you are following up with those companies. You have to make sure that you're finding the recruiters, right? Like, maybe you go on LinkedIn or whatever job board that you use, and you reach out to some people that work at the company that you found. Maybe you have some people in your own personal network, or if you went to college, you got some people in that network that you can tap into that may know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. You know what I mean? So sometimes networking can get you further than just applying for a role, if that makes sense. Then I would say the third part of this, which is kind of like a key ingredient, is to rest. Yeah, I know. A lot of us don't like to rest. We want to keep moving. We want to be doing all the things. I will give y'all a primary example. So prior to me getting laid off, I was already in a training program, right? I was looking for other jobs. I had actively been interviewing. And sometimes I was making it to like second, third rounds of interviews, but I was not necessarily getting the offers. So that was kind of like discouraging, but I kept going because I knew that eventually I was going to land the right role. And at the time, I was fully employed. So I'm like, well, I'm interviewing, you know what I mean? I'm not in a rush to necessarily get a new job. I would like to get a new job because I want to, go into a different industry. AI, all this technology, this stuff is here. It's advancing, it's moving, right? And if you're working somewhere and you don't necessarily see them adopting that, but if that's something that you want to move into, then you might have to leave that company. You might have to leave that position. So for me, I was just kind of working behind the scenes, taking some classes. I had a couple of mentors I was working with, and I was applying actively for jobs, and I was interviewing just to see what was out there. So like I said, I wasn't necessarily, in a position to where like, man, if I don't get the job, I'm stumped, right? Sometimes I did have those days where I kind of felt like, dang, I just went through all of this. I did all this research. I practiced for this interview. I've done all of these 2-hour mock interviews and I still didn't get an offer, right? So some days it was kind of discouraging, but I just kept going and I stayed hopeful that eventually I was going to get something. And I was just happy that, I was still gainfully employed. Now, again, when you've been laid off, when you've lost your job, you don't have that as a fallback anymore. So you kind of have to like switch up your routine and do some different things. So number 3, rest. That sounds so counterintuitive, right? But I know for me, going back to what I just explained to you guys, I had been interviewing and not necessarily landing the roles while I was gainfully employed. And sometimes I would be submitting maybe like 15, 20, 25, applications in a day. And that's a lot these days, right? Because you have to go in, you have to create like profiles on these company websites. You have to upload all this different stuff. Some of them want you to, submit your resume in a certain format. You have to put cover letters. I mean, it's a whole situation, right? So I think being able to apply for 20 to 25 jobs in a day, that's kind of a lot. But when I got laid off and I was in a season of rest, I just felt so strongly in my spirit that it wasn't a time for me to press the gas. Like something was just telling me, okay, Serena, you tired today. If I would be online and looking up, job descriptions and at different companies and stuff like that, as I mentioned, normally I would submit like at least 20 applications. But while I was laid off, I would sometimes only apply for like 5 jobs or 5 positions. There were a few days where I felt so strongly that I was only supposed to apply for 1 job. And I was like, God, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. I need to be applying for a massive amount of jobs. Like I literally remember seeing a post prior to me going on a little break from it on LinkedIn where somebody said before they got a job offer, they had submitted 1,000 applications. I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to take me forever, right? Like I was getting so discouraged reading that stuff. So that's why I was just like, I have to get off of here because I have faith, right? And that doesn't take away from the fact that, you really have to boots to the ground, do the dang on work. Nothing is just coming to you, right? Like you have to get up and do the work. But while I was in that season, going through that season now still, something just told me that like, you need to rest right now because you're probably going to need this energy, this strength for whatever you go on into next, right? Like you're going to need this focus. You're going to need it for the next season. So I would be applying for jobs, but not at the magnitude that I was when I was actually fully employed, which was so weird, super weird to me, right? What's so like interesting about this approach and, how I feel like God orchestrated it was that like, I went 2 months and I probably applied for maybe 45 jobs in the entire 2 months. And I started interviewing. I think I interviewed with maybe like 5 different companies in that time frame. And do you know, I got 2 offers. 2 offers. When I tell you rest is so important, because within that rest, you are being more intentional. You're not doing what they call spraying and praying, right? Like just throwing a bunch of applications and stuff out there and just, you know, doing anything. Because the next thing that you'll end up doing is potentially landing yourself in a role that you may not necessarily want. And then guess what's going to happen? A couple of weeks later, a couple of months later, you're probably going to be looking for something else. You're not going to like that job. So when I was in that season, going through that season of rest, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be supremely intentional about this. I know that this is really awkward that I only submitted 5 applications today. You know, I would literally feel like, I'm being lazy. I have to get up and do something. But no, that wasn't it. It was like me activating my faith, as in like, I'm going to put the applications out there that I did research on. I was super intentional about these 5 applications I put out. If I only submitted 1 or 2 applications in a day, I was super intentional about it because I did research on that company. I did research on the job titles at that company. I went through, combed through the pain points of that company. I looked at my current skill set and all of my transferable skills and saw the things that I could potentially bring to that company that would make me a valuable asset, right? Like if I were to be hired. So it wasn't about the volume per se. It was more so about the quality and the intentionality that I was putting into it, right? So the resting piece of it just kind of kept me focused, right? It kept me out of this space of being anxious. And I know that a lot of people, and this is just what I'm seeing on the streets, when they, get laid off and stuff like that, they're just really anxious and they're fearful and they are on information overload and they are not being intentional and they have too many people in their ear, right? Like, and they are not, spending time to kind of sit and be quiet and reflect and think about some things, right? So I think that rest, that's out of everything that I've just shared with y'all today, I think that's the most intentional piece. That's the most crucial piece, right? After you experience a job layoff, especially if you've been somebody who has worked in one industry or just been working in general for a really long time and you haven't had any breaks. You get up Monday through Friday, it's been the same thing. All right, hey guys, we're gonna have to cut the video short today, but I think for the most part, I got across the most crucial pieces I think you should focus on if you got laid off from your job or the other, right? Like if you are navigating a season of your life where you're trying to figure out what's next, I kind of gave you guys some key components that I think you should focus on, which is to make sure that you are grieving what you just lost. Be sure that you are super intentional about structuring your reset, right? So to just recap that, structuring your reset is determining how many jobs per day you need to be applying for, following up on those jobs, networking, getting outside of your comfort zone, doing some things that you may not have necessarily considered. Also tapping in with yourself and figuring out what you want to do next, because some people might not necessarily want to go right back into a job after they've been working for so long. Maybe, your next course of action is to step out on faith and become an entrepreneur or something like that, right? And then the last key piece is to make sure you are resting, right? This is a season of rest for you. It's not a season to be lazy. Did nobody tell you to just go on and sit down like, oh, well, I got laid off from a job, so now I don't have to do anything. No, you have to be very, very intentional about this time because you don't necessarily know how long it's going to take you to get another job. But then on top of that, listen, like I said, if you don't have a spouse, you don't have a roommate, you are taking care of yourself, your bills are going to keep coming, right? So, I mean, even if you have a nest egg, it will go quickly if you live in one of these major metropolitan cities. So I don't want you to take that third, component of rest as in like, I'm just telling you to be lazy and just not do anything. No, you need to be doing things, but you need to be very intentional about scheduling out times. And I like to call it white space in the calendar. I can't remember where I got that concept from, but it's just white space in the calendar where you intentionally don't put anything on there and you are doing other things like catching up on sleep, reading, Maybe your season of rest looks like, writing out your list of things to do for the next day, right? So you're going to rest today, but tomorrow you're going to get up and go to a conference in town, go to a Chambers of Commerce meeting or something like that, but just being very like intentional with your time, and taking the time to rest because you're going to need it for the next season. So I hope that encouraged somebody. Again, if you are experiencing a job loss, I'm so sorry. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Times are very, very strange right now. And, it's just a part of life. It's a natural part of life. And there is something else for you on the other side. So I just want you to keep that in mind. If you have any questions, let me know. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe. And then as always, y'all leave me some comments below. Let me know if you like this sort of thing. I know I said, you guys, if there's something that you want me to touch on, list it below, getting ideas for like topics and stuff like that, because I haven't really figured out how I want to structure the channel yet. All I do know is that I can't be on the sideline waiting to get started. I just have to get started and do with what I have. So with that, that's it. That's all for now. I'll talk to y'all later.